So today is trauma and abuse, and really, I want to go to the bottom thing, more understanding and healing, right? Because that's what it's about. So we're just going to cover that in a light topic. We got roughly 20 minutes left, so we'll cover that quickly today. If you guys have any questions, stop me. If we don't get through it all, we can always pick it up back up next week. So does everybody feel like they're clear on what trauma is? Does everybody feel like does everybody know what trauma is?
I think so.
Okay. So I'll just give you guys a quick, like, bullet points here, but really, like, has anybody heard of little T or big T trauma?
No.
So just so everybody understands, like, usually trauma is categorized in like a little T and a big T. I'm not a big fan of it because I think, going back to Gordy, what you said is like, we don't know how the other person emotionally takes it, right? Somebody could get in a car accident, that could be big T to them. That could be little T to me, or no T, right? Like, I could be like, who cares? It's a car accident. You go home and you get a new car and it's totaled and you move on. Yet I will say that sometimes in therapy they break it down little T, big T. So really what it is it's an emotional response to an event. And I know it says terrible event. It doesn't even have to be terrible. It's the story that we tell ourselves. So if somebody is like living at home, they're 34, I'm just using that example since we have that example, that could be very traumatizing to them because of what they went through to get there. So they could feel a lot of shame and guilt around it. So it can be very hard to talk about it. And they could be feeling guilty that they're living at home with their loved ones, and that could be very difficult to talk about as well. So again, shock, denial, deep rooted emotional stories. Um, Trauma has this long term shame and guilt built around it most of the time. Even when somebody is sexually molested, if you notice, a lot of them tend to blame themselves, tend to turn it inward, and this becomes a very like shame and guilt around themselves. Um, so again, one of my things that I really think is so important is the deterioration of, it's the fourth bullet point down. It says just unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, and when people have a lot of depression, anxiety, it comes from some sort of trauma most of the time, right? It's some sort of this unpredictable emotion that they can't handle, and they don't know how to handle or process. And so that's what we're really looking to help them with. And at the bottom, it says it comes with physical symptoms, which could be, like I said, anxiety, depression. It could be headaches, migraines, could be feeling nauseous, those type of things. So the mental and physical side of trauma. So again, seriously, body harms, injuries, those type of things, sexual abuse, those type of things. And then really the most important thing is, I think, on the emotional side, is the mental response that we have to it. And that's the thing where when we ask questions, hopefully we can get somebody to open up to, because they have to start to build different emotional responses. So from whatever happened with a job, and they feel like they can't commit to, or they can't go back to work, or they can't commit to how they feel, like, if they can start to open up about their emotional response, there can be this new way of this new pattern created. And when they learn how to handle that emotion, discuss it, to go for a walk, to let it go, they realize that they can handle it in a different way, and they can respond to it in a different way. And those are the most important things. Those are where space and healing starts to happen, is when we can help them again start to seek out their own healing inside themselves with questions. I think that's one reason I love questions so much, is because it helps somebody explore a new avenue of themselves and of others and of the world that they haven't explored before. So then again, this just goes, and I think the second bullet point down is a big one for traumatic experiences for most people, is like childhood trauma that they either didn't know was trauma, they don't even recognize as trauma, that they go through years of treatment, of therapy, of whatever, and then they finally realize, like, wow, this has really affected me for so long. yet they don't know it without somebody helping them explore that. And so I think out of all these topics, and again, we went to, this is a different list than the one before, but I don't know if any of your families dealt with poverty or homelessness, separation from loved ones. I mean, in a sense, like even just having a girlfriend or a boyfriend and having that breakup, like that breakup, it could have been very emotionally hard. It could be physically hard. So those are the type of things that we're looking at, and we want to help them start to explore themselves. And those are again just I always find it best through helping them explore through questions because they've already thought about most of these things they've thought about or they've have it in their subconscious. And when we ask questions, subconsciously it can come up more, and then hopefully starts to take like layers of an onion off. Right? I always like to talk to people about like layers of an onion. At the core of the onion, that's who we truly are. But we put layers up, and it protects us and it keeps us safe, and we don't talk about the underlying layers. But when we ask questions, layers start to peel off, and we feel safe. And we go back to Carolee's thing of, listen, ask questions and listen, because then people start to feel safe, and when they feel safe, they can start to open up and really start to have a good, deep conversation, and it can help some of that healing happen. Do you guys feel like any of these hit people, like the people that are working with? Any of the bullet points?
Yeah. The one that hits me is that living with a family member with a mental health or substance disorder is really understandable. Never dealt with the other ones that much.
Okay.
My wife probably has more, sudden separation from a loved one. So, but the poverty and discrimination and things like that, I don't relate to as traumatic experiences, at least for me.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, Gordy. Do you guys know who Gabor Mate is?
I don't.
Okay. So it's just if anybody wants to look him up, it's Gabor. That's his first name. And Mate is Mate. I believe I'm spelling it correctly. He's a very, I think I will say brilliant man. He deals with a lot of people like with addiction, very intelligent on how to help people in addiction with traumatic experiences. And he talks about generational trauma, meaning that this is really crazy, and I was very aware of this when we were having our first baby, of even just when a woman feels very stressed out when she's pregnant, it'll change the DNA of that baby. So even going back to the Holocaust, the people that survived the Holocaust, it changed and then they had kids. Their DNA for their kids were changed, and the kids that were because they were starved during the Holocaust, their DNA would change because it was such a traumatic experience. It changed the DNA of the kids, and each one of those generation of kids became more likely to be obese because of the starvation that their parents went through. So the only reason I want to bring that up is just because I want to relay the traumatic experience doesn't just have to be yours. It doesn't have to be the loved one we're talking about right now or the one that's in treatment. It could be generations of this. And it's crazy to think that, and there are ways to heal that and change that through therapy, through many different options, right? And we can go into those options at a different time if you guys want to. Yet I think it's so important to understand that the traumatic experience doesn't always have to be yours or theirs, yet we could still be curing it somehow in us. And that could come up in depression or anxiety or just how they handle relationships, things like that. Does anybody else have any comments they want to say on this slide before we move to the last few slides? And I know I'm going through this kind of quick, so we can always do a review or overview next week as well if we need to.
If I may make just a quick statement, my mother had a lot of childhood trauma when she was younger, and it affected her all the way throughout her whole life. And I don't know if I'd heard this from somewhere, but that sometimes this kind of trauma or experiences can like skip a generation, because, and I don't know if I'm saying that right or wrong, but someone in the medical field told me that, but I can't pinpoint where. But and because I look at everything my mother went through and everything that my daughter went through is almost identical, and I'm just going, why did it skip me? Why am I not dealing with these kind of things? And I mean, Chris, is that valid? Does that happen? Is that documented anywhere?
It is, yeah, for sure. And again, like, I'm going to be honest, we're on the precipice of studying these things, right? Like the generational trauma, it's skipping generations, it's storing in people's bodies in different ways, and then it is, from what we've seen in studies, it is 100% true. It's one reason it's so hard to deal with or understand, because it can skip a generation. It can be stored and repressed for so long, and then it can show up. And I don't tell you guys these things to say it's impossible. Like, these things can all be overcome. Yet just when you feel like they're healed and they come back up, it's okay. When you feel like, man, it just came out of left field, it's okay. Because we've all had these happen from past experiences, from our loved ones, from the loved ones that they had before that. Like, I have no doubt that when I found out stuff about my parents and how they were raised and things that were done to them or said to them, that it most certainly shows up in me and my brother. And if it doesn't show up in him, it may show up in me. It may show up in neither of us, but it may show up in my daughter. And these type of things and understanding just allows me to build a clearer, like, perspective and more love in the conversation. Understand, like, we're all going through this together, and that it's none of us are the problem. There's just a problem that we can solve together. Thank you, Carolee, for mentioning that. Annette, did you have something you want to say?
I said, that's really good. I like that.
Thank you. It's also just, again, if you guys ever, you're like, oh man, Carolee said this, Annette said that, what was it? Like, Gordy said this, I want to hear it again. These are all recorded, and you can go to your little place where you can see like the future upcoming events, and then there's a little, just right next to it says past. If you click on past, the videos that we've recorded from being on, since we've been on Circle, are up there, and then we're re-uploading the ones that we've had through Zoom when we were using Zoom. So just so everybody knows, if you ever want to go back and recapture anything, it's not gone or lost forever. So this is just some crazy, can you guys see this? Is that way too dark? Can you see that? This is just crazy statistics for people that have, and you don't have to have every one of those bullet points of traumatic experiences, but some sort of trauma in their life. They're 2 times more likely to smoke, 2.5 more times likely to sexually have more sexual experiences, have more sexually transmitted diseases, 7 times they consider themselves alcoholics, 10 times more likely to use drugs, 12 times more likely to attempt suicide. And I don't tell you guys this again to like depress you. I tell you this just to impress upon you that the truth of the matter is, if you see this coming up with your loved one, hopefully this builds a different understanding of, like, man, it probably is from some of that trauma. Like, when I was sexually molested and things like that, like, my mom did the best she could. I literally didn't even know. My dad didn't know. I told him, I don't know, a couple years ago, just because I don't feel like it really affects me anymore. And it came up during conversations. Like, I didn't even know that happened. My parents were divorced, like, just got divorced at the time. Like, my mom was dealing with, I guess it never got brought up to my dad. I was 5 or 6 years old. I was 5 and 6 years old. So I wasn't going over to my dad and saying, like, hey, Dad, I got molested. Yet, you know, I look back and, like, a lot of these things showed up in my life, I'm sure, because of the trauma. So if you guys see these things happening with your loved one, it's not because they're broke or they're damaged or they're just making dumb choices. It's because they don't know how to handle the past trauma. And when we can help them with that, then we can help these things go away. So I hope this gives you hope if you've seen those, if you're like, man, why they do those things, that now there's some understanding and some hope and vision to move forward with those. So healing trauma. And this is, and I know we have 2 minutes. So I like deep breathing. And I want to encourage this with you guys when you're having those hard or courageous, hard or conversations, whatever word you want to use with your loved one, that the more we can restore, like, so does everybody know, everybody knows like fight or flight, right? So either you have your autonomic nervous system, which is your central nervous system. And if we feel like we're getting told something, we usually turn, like we get shallow breath, our heart rate goes up, because back in the day, that meant like something was trying to attack us. So we were going to have to either run or fight it. So the more we can do some deep breathing, the more we can help the loved ones get into deep breathing when they're getting stressed, when they're having anxiety, depression. The more we can sit like, hey, we're having a hard conversation. We're sitting in like on our couches and we're in a love space. Like, hey, let's just close our eyes and do some deep breathing. It opens up space and it opens up our central nervous system, because that's what reacts. That's what causes a lot of anxiety and depression. Is we get something happens, our brain goes to a past experience, and then we get like revved up or we get like scared and our body reacts. And the more we can bring in some deep breathing, meditation, if you're into it, I love meditation, but at least some deep breathing, it really starts to have our body act different. And there's several books out there that talks a lot about our body carrying the trauma. So when we can open up that deep breathing, it allows our body to relax and still have that feeling or still have that thought, yet deal with it differently and feel it differently. So it's one of the most important things I can encourage any of us to do. I even do this like when I'm running, like my heart rate will go way up. So I'll close my eyes while I'm running and I'll do some deep breathing and my heart rate will go down. And that's just a way for me to mimic the same stresses that I'll have in my normal day life in an experience that I'm having that I have some more control over. Again, I think the deep breathing and the questions asking goes down to the third bullet point of self-discovery and understanding. That's what we really want to help the other person do. That's the reason I think the questions and listening are so important. Like I said, the deep breathing resets the central nervous system, and really helping them. So they call it ACE, but it's adverse childhood experiences, helping them have those come up and learning how to handle those and deal with those are a big thing. And again, only the individual can tell you if they feel like that happened in their experience. And it could be like, man, I remember my parents fighting this one time, and that was my traumatic experience. Could have happened once, yet they could totally cling on to that. And I really like the 4 C's: calm, contain, care, and cope. So if we can help somebody like calm down, and we can contain that experience so it doesn't like feel overflow to all these, like, oh my goodness, man, this one thing happened to me. Life's the worst. I can't even have a job. This is the worst thing. Like, I just was talking to one of my clients earlier and something happened. He's like, this is the reason, like, I can never move forward in life and I never have progress and it sucks and blah, blah. And I'll tell you, if we can help them contain it to this one experience, it helps them only see it like as this one little lane, opposed to it happens all in life. And then we can help them start to develop some like care for themselves, some self-care. Then they can learn how to cope with the experience. Sleep is extremely important. So if your loved ones are struggling with that, if you're struggling with that, sleep is so important for us. And then healthy hobbies, time with loved ones. I think we can all relate to that and what that really means to us. Do you guys have any questions, statements, comments? I know we're a couple minutes over, so thank you for sticking with me. Let me stop sharing. Hold on.
I did have one quick question.
Yeah.
There was one that it said resetting the central nervous system.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So again, that kind of goes back to the fight or flight, right? So we have our calm, normal state that we're in now. And so when we feel anxiety, when we feel depression, when we feel trauma, our body reacts. right? Again, shallow breath, usually feel like tension, stress comes on, right? Anxiety, depression, people explain it differently, but that's how it happens. So the more we can realize that state and help somebody or help ourselves, more importantly, develop that deep breathing, it allows our central nervous system to still have that same thought, to still have that same, in a sense, feeling, but now we handle it differently. Now it becomes a totally different experience to ourselves. Does that make sense? Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, is that also kind of why my daughter said that someone told her about doing tapping?
Tapping is, yeah. So tapping can help you return to presentness, right? So a lot of people want to or talk about being present nowadays. I think it's very challenging. Like in anxiety and depression come from past and future experience, like right, like usually anxiety, like oh my goodness, all this stuff's I need to get all this stuff done in the future. Like I'm not going to be successful. That's anxiety. Depression is from the past, is what is referenced. And what I will say is like tapping can be for you to go back to a calming state, for you to return to present. And deep breathing is about returning to present state as well. I just prefer deep breathing. It's one of my favorite things to do. But yes, tapping is very similar.
Because my daughter uses that a lot.
And if it works for her, again, I tell everybody like find what works for you. There's so many tools out there in this world. Don't just listen to me. Like go listen to podcasts on any of the stuff. They'll have their own tools, and you go like, "Wow, that's amazing." I know. I'm gonna just tell you this. I know for your daughter, walking works well for her, right? Like just getting out and walking. I think that's extremely healthy, and sometimes that's the best thing to do. Is like, hey, we're having a difficult conversation. Where our central nervous system, you don't have to say this, but is getting like the fight or flight's coming in. So like, let's just go separately. Let's go for a walk, or you can do some deep breathing. The other person go for a walk, and then let's reconvene. I will say the more I can get my wife and me to like do some deep breathing together during those conversations, the better we are at handling those conversations in a loving and healthy way. Does anybody have any other, Carolee, great question. Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts that they want to, throw at us? And I'm grateful for everybody joining and everybody being open and vulnerable and sharing what you guys shared today. Okay, I will take the silence and the staring at me as we don't have anything else to say. I'm grateful for you guys all being here. Thank you for listening to me and just having an open conversation. And I hope and we all got something from it that we can take away. Again, the videos are there posted if you guys want to watch them again. You guys have my contact information. It's my direct cell phone. So if you need to get a hold of me, text, call, whatever, know I'm here. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Gordon.
I just I had a couple of notes here. I'm just wondering at this stage, and where things are better than I do, but I'm just wondering how I support my loved one kind of at this stage of recovery, and kind of I don't know, when do I stop worrying, or does that ever go away?
Do you have more? Do you want to start there?
Start there.
Love it. Let's do it. And you prefer Gordy, correct? Not Gordy.
Gordy,
correct?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay. So those are great questions, and I first want to ask you, do you feel like you're supporting your loved one right now as best as possible?
Well, I feel like I'm giving him a lot of space, but there just seems to be a lot of passiveness. I mean, there's some good things happening, but, and again, we've talked about patience before, but I'm not seeing a lot of motivation on their part. At least to be more participative in the home environment.
Okay. So that's something you're hoping for and wanting. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Yes.
Okay. And he lives with you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Um, that's a challenge. First and foremost, Carolee, can you relate to any of that?
Oh, are you talking to me?
I am, yes.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Well, when our loved one was living with us, a lot of things were taken advantage of and things like that. So I'm actually thinking that living outside of the home has been actually better because it's helped her to own it herself. She's had to realize, okay, if I'm going to make this work, I've got to make some changes. I've got to do some things. I've got to take the bull by the horns, so to speak. And I mean, while it's not perfect and things aren't going exactly the way she would like it to, things seem to be doing somewhat better. She's still having struggles and dealing with other people and things like that. But and I worry about her like you do, Mr. Olson. And so it's you never stop worrying. Never.
Thanks, Carolee. I appreciate that. Gordy, do you feel like you're being taken advantage of? Because I think that's a good
A little
question.
bit, not nearly what it was before.
Okay.
So there's been some improvements there. There's been improvements in making and keeping appointments, and those are wins. But I'm waiting and trying to give space on like pursuing employment to help out a little bit.
Okay.
And I know right now he's not in a position to be moving out, because if he did, I'd be funding it for a while.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. So just to take it back. So I agree with Carolee. Like I'm a new parent, but I have parents obviously, and I feel like it's God's blessing. You guys never get to stop worrying. That's as soon as you become a parent. That's what I feel like. I feel like my parents are still, somewhat worried. Like not that we're not going to make it in life, but there's just always something that you want, like your kids to do better and have better, and so you're worried about, are they going to do that? So I don't know that I can answer will the worry go away. I think the worry will change, if that makes sense. Right?
Okay.
I think that it won't be the things you're worried about now any longer. But and I don't. Do you tend to be a worrier?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm not. I don't want to just flip it back on you and make it about you. You got to find ways to be healthy, like, because my mom's quite a worrier, right? And so I talked to her about that, because I'm like, I don't feel worried, and I can't make her not worried. I can reinforce, like, the life we're living, and it's going well, and things are prosperous, but she still worries because I don't know, because I think that's what she does. So with the worry side, I would encourage you to work on that yourself and find ways to. But I also think when you said, here are the things that are going better, if you can focus more on those opposed to things that aren't going well, that helps you worry less. Do you guys agree, or is that just me?
I agree.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay. Because I just find, like, when I'm like, man, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this, like, I worry about it more. But when I'm like, oh man, let me be grateful for the things I have, I feel better, at least inside. I'll say it that way. And I worry less about the things I don't have. The motivation thing, do you feel like you can say something to them, or do you feel like if you say something to him, it's going to hurt the relationship, or it's going to make him regress?
I'm fearful if I came down, too hard, it would definitely regress.
Okay. I'm assuming I'm hearing your wife in the background. Is that correct? Okay, cool. I'm like, am I hearing something? I don't
No,
think I am. I'm not going crazy. I know I have a cold right now, but I know I'm not going crazy.
She's agreeing with you.
Okay, cool. So I think, let's discuss this because I think this is a great topic, right? These are the big, like, we can give you PowerPoints, we can talk about how to handle things, but the real life action is where it really matters. And for me, Gordy, I think it's so important to be able to address these situations with love. And I'm sure everybody's heard like the sandwich acronym, right? To sandwich a compliment, right? So you say something nice, and you tell them something they can work on, and then you say in with something nice. Has everybody heard that before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I will say, I think you have to find a place because you said coming down hard.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and again, you guys know the people you love better than I do, obviously. I think that there has to be some sort of expectation or standard, I'll say, because I like the word standard better, of like, hey, we have to raise our standards here. Like, what is he just not even attempting to get a job, or is he?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
Because we've only talked about it when he's brought it up.
Okay.
But I think the effort is minimal because he's so down and out mentally, and from being depressed and having some anxiety over it.
Okay. About getting a job.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm assuming you wanted to work full time, but as right now,
I'd be happy with anything, honestly.
Okay. And I think, do you feel like you can have a conversation like we're having right now? Like, if he's brought it up, do you feel like you can bring it up?
If he brings it up, yes, then we can talk about it.
But you don't feel like you can bring it up, is that correct?
I feel like when I do, it's like like it's like you don't understand how I feel.
Okay. Do you understand how he feels?
I don't know that I don't know that I know the depth. Certainly have empathy, and because I know what that feels like, but I don't know how deeply he feels compared to how I feel. I feel awful sometimes about the whole situation, just that we're here, and it doesn't decrease my love, it doesn't decrease my concern. It's just, I wonder why we're here and how do we crawl out, and how do I inspire the motivation, the positive motivation to be more self-sustaining. For him to be more self-sustaining.
Okay. I think I'm gonna come back to those if that's okay. I'm gonna jump to Kiralee just because I think she said something really profound, and I think it ties to you, Gordy, from a couple weeks ago. Kiralee, what did you say several times, a couple weeks ago when we were on our last video call? Do you remember about like the thing you do for like to open up space for you and your daughter right now?
I just listened and then was quiet. Listened and was quiet. And,
okay.
I mean, true. I mean, I still tried to give some parental or mom advice, so to speak, but too many times I've heard that listening is more important than trying to give advice, and it's taken a while to get to the point where we are now. Because I remember when she first came to live with us, she had lost her job, lost her apartment, and we were trying to get her to get a job, and she was also on unemployment and trying to do those job interviews to keep up the unemployment and everything. And then as time went on, she was just so, her anxiety level was like above her head. And it was just so hard. She almost got scared to go out and put herself out there. But she finally did. It took a lot of strength for her to do that, but she did, and now she's finally working after like 7 months. And she called me the other day and said, I'm really enjoying this. I think this is going to be good for me. But again, it had to be her. It had to be her choice. And while my husband was the one that was kind of pushing things like, have you got a job yet? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? It was in a way stressing her out, going, oh, I got to do this. But I would just try to not be lax about it, but not as, what's the word I want to use? Checking up on her, so to speak.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Did she get employment before or after she moved out?
After.
Uh-huh.
Because she put herself in recovery and chose to go into, after that, went into sober living. This was all her, in fact. We never knew that she was doing it until she came up and said, oh, by the way, I'm leaving. I'm going, what? And she goes, yeah, I'm going into, I forgot what it was, the place that she was in, but it was like a place to go before you go to sober living.
In treatment.
Yeah, in treatment. So. Okay.
Yeah, so the only thing I want him to get, and here I'm being selfish, but I would like to see him get a job so he can move out, because I don't think he wants to be here. But
how old is he?
Pardon me?
How old is he?
34.
Nobody 34 wants to live with their parents. Let's just be honest.
So I mean,
you don't want him there. He doesn't want to be there.
Yeah, he wants out, but I want him to. I don't want to provide the out. I want him to be able to fend for himself when he goes out.
And you're already obviously supporting him by having him live in your house.
Yes.
Okay. So if we go back a few levels, first, Carolee, thank you for sharing, and Gordy, thank you both for sharing. I want to say, and I hear a few things that you're like. I think your wife said, we ask him stuff and he doesn't really say anything. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think, I'm going to go back to just like the base root of something. And I think it's so important that when we engage with someone, we do need to ask them how they feel. I think that's important. Also say if they don't feel comfortable with opening up, like he said to you, I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but he said to you, like, you don't understand how I feel. Is that correct? Something similar to that. And how do you guys handle that? Because my statement would be like, you're right. I don't understand how you feel.
I tell him, believe it or not, I do to a degree. I'm not sure, again, how deeply, but I know what it's like to be depressed and have a tremendous amount of anxiety and be kind of dysfunctional because of it.
Okay.
That part I know, but I don't know. Again, I don't know his depth of those same things.
And you don't know how it is to be 34, living with your parents, have anxiety, so you feel like you can't get a job, those type of things, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. And I always I'm going to tell you guys a rule that I love. Meet the person where they're at. So if they're like, you don't know how I feel, you're right, I don't. right? Because if I'm like, no, I know how you feel, like now we're in a battle. Does that make sense? Because he's like, no, you don't know how I feel, and then I'm like, no, I do. Now we're battling. But if he says like, hey, you don't know how I feel, you're like, you're right, I don't. Like, tell me how do you feel? Like, what's coming up for you? And I'm not saying he's going to say it. Go ahead, sorry, Cody.
Yeah, he's not real open.
I bet he's not.
And that's the part is kind of trying to draw this information and conversation out of him. It's a chore.
Okay. Do you guys have a sit down like with open space, or do you guys just kind of do it randomly, or what does that look like for you guys?
Randomly with a lot of open space right now.
Do you know if he'd be open to having a conversation? Meaning like, hey, once a week on Mondays, we get together and just kind of discuss how things are going for you and for us. Like not,
I
like,
can try it.
Okay. And like, that's what I like to do with people, right? Like I like to, because if it's set up and it's repetitive, it's easier for me to like to start attaching like, oh, Monday we talk about household chores, whatever it is, right? I'm just making up something. For my wife, Marriage Monday, right? So we talk about our marriage. But I feel like if that's the case, then maybe they can build on stuff throughout the week too, and they can write some stuff down. They can remember it. They can come back. He may not be open to it. I think it's always good to ask them, though. Going back to Carolee's like of asking questions and listening is like, what do you feel like you're open to? Because I want to help you, right? Even if it's nothing else like that, I want to help you, support you. That's the reason you guys are letting him live in the house. How do we support you? And I'm assuming you've asked that, correct?
Yeah.
And what response you get, I don't know.
There's not, and my wife's talking in the background, but we agree that
Yeah.
there is.
She can say it louder. We can hear her.
He often says, "I don't know how you can help me."
Okay. I think that what do you guys what do you guys feel like you want to do to help him more than you're already doing?
I just want to make sure that I'm here, which we are. I think he knows that. I have been open about that. We just want to be supportive enough that he finds something within himself to move forward.
Okay. Is he open more to mom or to dad or neither?
Probably dad.
Okay. Okay. Do you, and I'm not telling you how to like run your family. Do you tell him you love him?
Pardon me?
Do you tell him you love him?
Yes. Mom tells him 4 or 5 times a day. I tell him a couple times a week.
Okay. And I think if we start our conversation with, I kind of like an opening guideline of like, hey, I'm having this conversation because I love you and I want to know how to support you. And you may not know that. That's okay. I don't know it. Right? Like, again, we can agree on that. We both don't know it. But I want to figure out how to like explore that with you. And I want to figure out how to like open up that conversation. Because you don't know and I don't know. We both don't know. We can go find somebody to help us with that if that's what we need. Or like, right, we can go find a therapist. We can sit in your therapy session. We can get a coach. We can just find a mediator or a third party. Or we can like explore it together a little bit more and see what we can figure out together. Because these are challenging things.
Yeah.
Right? He has no idea how you can help him. He's trying to figure out how to help himself. He can't figure that out.
That's true.
I think he's to the point where he is embarrassed that he's as old as he is.
Of course he is.
He's embarrassed that he's still with us. I mean, he used to be very, very successful in his, he's a college graduate and his life just went downhill and we're just here to help him.
And I think if you guys can open up space for those kind of conversations, like, do you feel embarrassed? Like, you don't have to ask him that if you don't want to, but hopefully if you open up space, he can eventually say, like, I do feel embarrassed. Like, hey, I know you don't, like, you're 34, you don't want to live with your parents, do you? He'll probably say no to that. And all I'm saying is when we start to ask these certain questions, it starts to open up conversation.
Okay.
What is
Yeah.
go ahead.
He does. He's not a real good conversationalist, though. I mean, he graduated in communications in college, and he doesn't like to talk to us.
Okay, that's fair. He doesn't like to talk to other people.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
he's good at that. He's good.
And I will say this, that's not uncommon, right? I think like we, as being a child, and obviously we're all children of somebody here, we want to like have our parents feel proud of us. We want to like make them feel good about like the job they did raising us. Like from a person that did drugs for 17 years, it's not like I was like, man, I can't wait to tell my parents I'm doing more drugs. Like that was never a highlight of my life, right? I did they love and accept me? Like after I told them, yes. But that was one of the most fearful things was to tell them that I was struggling. And so I don't think it's unusual for them to. That's sometimes the reason that, like I said, a therapist or a coach is a good person because then your son or whoever can then go to that person and they can communicate in a better way because sometimes the people that are closest to us are hardest to communicate with. And I'm not saying that's even you guys. Go on.
He's to the age though where he needs to take that by the reins and get a psychologist and go do that.
Okay.
I help him find who his insurance will pay for, and then he needs to do that. I can't make his appointments for him.
I totally agree with that. And I think that's something that I'm not saying you guys should do. All I was saying is like sometimes a third party is beneficial. What I do want to say is if you guys do help him see, like, as you start the conversation of like, hey, let's put together some sort of timeline of and ask him like, are you open to putting together some sort of timeline of here's when we can get a job? And obviously, again, go back to the conversation of you don't want to live with us. Like that's,
yeah.
I mean,
We've done that. We've
Okay.
done that. And he comes up with, I never know if I'm going to feel like going the day that I have to be there. So
Yeah.
he doesn't do anything.
Okay. So he doesn't go get a job because of that. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
A little bit of a fear of commitment.
Yeah, a fear of commitment. Mm-hmm.
And so there's no commitment, which builds more fear of commitment. And then you go like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be there, see, because I can't even commit to it.
Yeah.
Are there little things that you guys can have him do that he can commit to doing around the house to help him feel like he can commit to things more and that would benefit you guys as well?
He'll do whatever I ask him. I'd like him to see if I did ask him the end of last week to come up with a list of things that he could do to help us out more around the house. I haven't seen the list yet.
Okay. Because he's not committed to it yet.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay. And I think it's great for him to write the list out. I also think that, like, with that being said, I want you to make sure you guys are reinforcing that, right? Like, hey, here's one thing that I want you to do or I need you to do since you're living here. And have it be like this thing that he does consistently so he can commit to that. And this may sound, and going back to Carol Lee, she said, Carol Lee, I'm going to go back to you. This takes some time, right? It took some time for your daughter to get a job and feel good about doing those, right? I think you said around 7 months. Is that correct?
It took 7 months.
Okay. And I'm not saying, Gordy, that it has to be 7 months at all. What I'm saying, though, is if we can start to help him find 1 or 2 things a week that he can commit to and actually follow through and do, he'll build this belief that he can commit to those.
Okay.
And then if he can commit to those, he can commit to bigger things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. What is your guys' thoughts? Because I know you guys have feedback and you deal with them every day. I don't.
Yeah, I asked. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I don't know why our picture went sideways, but
That's okay.
I asked him the other day, I said, will you do one thing for me today and report at the end of the day? I said, could you recognize like one tender mercy that happens to you in your life today? And he said he would, but he never came back to me. I should have followed up, but I didn't.
Okay. And here's what I'll say. I think you're right. You could have followed up. Also, it's on him to follow up with you. Yet I think if the truth of the matter is, if we can get him to do like a physical test, since he's not great at like sharing his emotions and how he feels with you guys, probably giving him like a tender mercy is like a feeling an emotion. I'm like, Mom, I'm not doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's like, yeah, Mom, I'll do that. And then like, you know,
Yeah.
right. And then he walks away. So like maybe if there's a physical task he can do, that helps him better than an emotional task.
Okay.
That's all I would suggest. Like, hey, take out the trash. Boom. Okay, you did that, right? Whatever it is, wash some dishes. I don't know what you guys have going on in your household, but I would say let him, like Gordy said, like develop a list with you guys though, right? Like, hey, let's just write out a few things that you can do to help around here. We have some suggestions, but we want to know what you're open to, because at the end of the day, you got to commit to it. And if there are like physical things you can do, perhaps that will build, because that's what I find is if we can build those small ones, then we can build to a bigger thing of going to work.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's really good. I like that.
Does he have a car?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Here's an amazing thing that happens nowadays. There's something called like Instacart or food, I don't know, whatever, the DoorDash food deliveries. He doesn't have to feel like going to work that day. I will say, I'm also going to tell you guys, that's something we got to move past, because none of us feel like getting up and going to work I don't know, does everybody work? I work. I don't feel like going to work every day. I'm going to be honest. Do you guys? You guys every day you wake up and go like, yes. Okay, so no, it's not just me. Okay, so all I will say is those type of jobs allow him to have something where he can go make some money. And even if it's like, hey, like just do this one, go deliver one place today. You made 10 or 20 bucks. It's not great, but it still builds commitment that he goes like, I can do this. I can get out of like feeling like this. Like I can go do something. Because sometimes what happens is there's people, or I'll say me, like I'm so invested in me and like how I feel and all the things that are going wrong with me, that if I don't look externally to help somebody else. But when I go to work, or I go do the thing, or I go deliver food, I don't do that, but I'm just using an example. Like I go deliver food, it gets me out of me. And sometimes what I find with people in addiction is they're just so focused on them, like their struggles, what's going on, woe is me of the world.
Yeah,
people that, right? Like if we can help them get outside of themselves just for 5 minutes. Hey, go get in the car and drive to the grocery store, pick up some groceries and take it to somebody that maybe can't do that for themselves. Then like perhaps they start to feel a little bit better, and they don't focus just on how bad they feel. They focus on solving somebody else's problem, and it helps them solve some of their own problem.
Okay. I think we've dominated enough of this conversation. We will.
No, we haven't. We got 30 more minutes of this, Gordy. No, I'm joking.
Well, we'll work on those things.
Okay. And I know that was a lot. So if you guys need to reach out to me personally, I think you have my number, you have my email.
Yeah, I think between Annette and I, we can remember the gist of what we need to kind of try to go do.
Okay, wonderful. And I hope those work for you. I hope that was helpful. Was it helpful?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Carolee, do you have anything you want to jump in here on?
Just don't give up. I know I personally pray for my daughter all the time. And it's hard. It's super hard when you have a child who is going through different struggles and everything. And it's just, I don't really know exactly what to say, but just let them know that you're never going to give up on them, that you love them no matter what. My daughter did a lot of different things that was really, really hard to know that she did, but I just said, no matter what, I love you. I want to help you get where you want to be. I know you don't want to be living here in our house, but we're going to help you get to what situation that you want to be in. And it's finally starting to work. Not perfect, but it's getting there. It's getting there.
I think that's well said. I think it's I think we all want to be loved. We all want to be loved for who we are, all of our faults, all of our goodness. So when we can give love for that, without making it just, have somebody walk all over you, that's definitely where the boundaries have to come up. And we have to understand, like, hey, your journey of healing has to be your own. It has to be each one of your family members' own, right? Like, you can't do it for them, no matter if you let him live with you until he's 74, not 34. Like, right, it's not going to necessarily improve his life. And sometimes, like, having those boundaries and those hard conversations, those courageous conversations are important to have, because sometimes those are the wake up moments that we all need, and we're afraid to do that, or we're afraid to have those. Yet when we can come at it with love and still accepting them and loving them and not like putting them down, but still letting them know what we need to, right? I don't, like, Gordy, I know you said the word selfish earlier, and I was running last night, and I was listening to this podcast, and he just said, like, the end of the podcast was, what is one thing, if you could tell, like, if you could, like, make a law for the world, right? You were the world dictator, you can make a law for everybody, what would it be? And he said, like, love more. And it was, I'm sure everybody knows who this is, it was Tony Robbins. And it made me think, like, none of us want to be selfish, but we want to have self-love enough that we tell other people what we need and want. At the same time, we hope that, like, we love them enough to, like, listen to what they need and want, and that we can come together on that. And I think that's one of the true healing points, is how do we love ourselves enough to hold boundaries, to have those courageous conversations, and love them enough to have courageous conversations without, like, putting them down, but listening to what they need and want too, and finding where we can, like, where we can come to some agreements on that, and some compromise, and some way to move forward and help each other meet those wants and needs and expectations.
Well, no. So, yeah, you're saying, have these conversations. However, sometimes when I say things to him, it's like he feels like I'm attacking him in some way.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not at all, but it's like I have to use just the right wording, or he takes it wrong, and then we're on another bad plane.
Okay. I think that is.
Been there, done that.
Curly, go ahead.
Just said, been there, done that.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And I want to go back to Carolee is saying, like, I think a lot of times the conversation, and maybe you're already doing this, Miss Olson, or Mrs. Olson, sorry, is that, like, perhaps, do you ask questions or do you make statements?
Well, that's a good point. Probably I make too many statements and not ask enough questions. So
Do you think if you ask questions, maybe he would open them up, or maybe he'd feel more comfortable? Because sometimes as parents, we, like, make statements because we want to help our kids, right? Like, and that's all you want to do. You love them so much, you just want to help them. You're like, man, these things would help. Please do them. Yet do you think if you ask more questions, maybe he'd open up?
Possibly. Yeah. Okay. That's a good thought.
Okay. And I will say, like, one of the most important things I've learned is most people know what they need to do and want, and, like, know what they want to do. Sometimes they just need to be asked questions to help prompt them in a direction. And I get that's extremely challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But the question thing is so important, because questions open somebody up, but statements tend to, like, close somebody down, because they do feel attacked, right? They do feel like, whoa, now it's me versus you. And you want it to be, like, not, again, if we go back several weeks, there's a problem. He's not the problem. You're not the problem. There's a problem that's out here that you guys can both go towards and solve. But if one of you feel like you're the problem, or one of you feel like you're getting attacked like you're the problem, then now it's like a battle, because none of us want to be the problem. We just want to solve a problem together. And questions tend to help, like, hey, this is the problem we're seeing. How do we do this together? Like, what do you see? Do you feel that way at all? Is that just me? Maybe it's just me. And I hope that helps, because information is great, but application equals transformation. And so these are like things where we're actually working and applying them on life. This is where we get like feedback from our own life, and we can go like, oh man, okay, here's an adjustment I can make. Okay, cool. Let me ask you a question instead of making a statement. Oh wow, that really worked well this time. Next time it didn't. I'm gonna do it again. Oh, it worked great this time. Yeah, Carolee, go ahead.
Can you say that again? I'm writing it down.
Sure, the application transformation.
The information is great.
Yeah, information is amazing, right? It is. But application equals transformation. Information doesn't mean anything, to be honest. It's cool. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever met somebody, they read a ton of books and they don't make any like changes in them. They don't apply it. There's no transformation to their life.